In this video, I'll walk you through how to use either the R version of Radiant or the Python version. So you already have access to the R version of Radiant from the launch menu. So let's just try that. Press 3 and enter. I should go ahead and open up Radiant. There we go. And then in basics, we have probability calculator. So one of the questions that you looked at, something along these lines, and specify a lower bound. And so here the question was related to how many new ventures should you support. So I've selected binomial, selected some inputs, and so I can scroll through this and see at what point I get a probability that is larger than or equal to 0.95. Now, question is this rounded up to 0.95 or down? So let's try increasing the number of decimal. Yeah, so this is rounded down to 0.95. So this is an example of how you would use the probability calculator. You specify your distribution you want, the parameters for the distribution, upper or lower bound, potentially how many decimal places you want. All right, so let's close that. That's basically how you use Radiant for R. You press 3 and enter from the launch menu and it starts up, and then use whatever tools you need. So what about the version for Python? Well, there's an older version of PyRSM already available in the Docker container, and so we're going to upgrade that. So this is the page about Radiant, a browser-based interface for business analytics in R and Python that is part of Canvas. So you can see that in one of the modules. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy that line. And then let's go to VS Code. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do in VS Code is run that piece of command. And what does that do? It is going to go ahead and install the latest version of PyRSM. And then particularly, it's going to install it to a user location. This is a location that will remain accessible even after you restart the Docker container. Let's go ahead and run that. I actually already did this because I wanted to make sure that everything was working properly, and it is. So you should just get an output here that suggests you're all fine. And then how can we go ahead and try out some different things? So because the interface is a little bit different than the one for Radiant 4R. So in that same page I was just on, where we had the install command for the latest version of PyRSM, there is a notebook that's linked called Basics Probability Calculator. So if I click on that, I can go ahead and download the notebook file that has the example in it. You just click on that and it will download, and you can download it to where you need it to be, which would be somewhere where you can find it with a Docker container. So actually, why don't I go ahead and do this? I'm actually just going to do that step 2, just to make it easier for you. So I'm going to download this to my downloads folder. There's actually multiple versions already in there, I see. Okay, I'm just going to rename that real quick to the one I want. Actually, no, that's fine. And now what I'm going to do is I have VS Code already open. I can just go ahead and drag that file directly into the File Explorer in VS Code. So this is the one that I just downloaded. So let me close this. So how does this work? Well, same idea as a regular notebook. I'm importing the library PyRSM, and I'm going to add a line here just to double check that we indeed have the latest version installed. So I would do that by saying RSM, which is how we imported PyRSM, and then version, and let's see if that indeed comes out to be 0.9.4. Oh, gotta get my kernel set up. There we go, 0.94. All right. So there are some examples here. These are the same examples that are provided for the help files for Radiant for R. Excuse me. And you can run those and get the results that you would want, including the plots. I'm just going to skip through those and kind of go to the more interesting piece, which is down here, which is where I want to be able to run Radiant in an interactive format. So I'm going to go ahead and run this cell. As soon as I do that, it's going to open up a web page just like with Radiant for R, and I can select the parameters I want to work with. Now in the black input here, there is the code that is being generated in the backend as I interact with the user interface. So I'm going to set this to 100 as a starting point and 0.5. And you notice as soon as I do that, the plot changes, the output changes, as well as the code changes. So I'm going to specify a lower bound of 2. We need at least 2. And you'll see here what happens to the plots and to the probabilities. So just like with the previous example in R, Radiant for R, I'm just going to reduce this number until I hit 0.5, which is right around here. Again, let's double check. By the way, notice that if something is set to the default, for example, number of decimal places, you don't see the argument. So let's increase the number. As soon as we do that, then the argument gets added to the PC summary function. So this looks indeed like we were rounding down to 0.95. Doesn't look like we can go down any further though. If we go to 92, no, then we're below the 0.95 threshold. So this is the number that we want. Just set this back to the default. So now I can either copy and paste the Python code here, or just click on stop. And then when I go back to the notebook that I was looking at, you'll see that the code has been imported here. So I can just copy and paste this. And let's make a new code cell and run that. Right, and so here's the output that I wanted from Radiant. There are two invites here to accept an extension, and they depend on which cohort you're in. So I'm going to click on this one right here, open it up in a new tab. It's going to take me to GitHub Classroom, and I see the user ID I'm going to use for this video over there. Say yes. All right, and then it's going to ask me if I want to accept this assignment. I do. Accepted it. This is going to take a minute before it is able to provide me with access to this extension. I should just be able to refresh my browser, and then it shows up. There it is. So this is now a repository that was created for me. I'm going to go take a look at it, and I'm going to work on it and complete it. So I have this repository that I want to bring down to my local VS Code running attached to the Docker container. So I'm going to click on code and then get the Git URL that I need. Let's switch over to VS Code. I'm going to open up the command palette and type clone, and that'll get me to git clone. And I'll paste in the information that I need, press enter, and I'll put this in my Git directory. So it should go ahead and clone, and then it's going to ask me, hey, do you want to open this up in a new workspace? Yeah, let's do that. All right. There's already a workspace file in here. We can just ignore this. We don't need it. All right, so let's close this. So this is all the information that you will have downloaded, and our task is to make some changes to both the code template notebook and the code template R file. So let's start with the Python file. Open that up. And there's some very basic Python in here to define a couple of variables and print them. Let's run that. There we go. And now it says here, before pushing to GitHub the second time. All right, so what we want to do is we want to see what happens if we run the code like this. All right, so if I try to run this code, will it work? No, because Z is not defined. I'm going to save this anyway, because I want to see what happens as a consequence if I try to commit a notebook that has a problem in it. So you notice that here on the left, the little Git icon now has a 1 because we've changed one of the files. We're going to do the same thing with the R file. If I open into this, let me make this a bit bigger for you. If I want to execute this code, I'm going to open up a terminal on the right here. Let me just delete that so you can see how I do this. So I'm going to press control backtick. Or you can use the menus at the top where it says terminal. You can click on that and open up a new terminal. And so here, I'm going to make this a bit wider. Type R. It's going to start R for me. So now I can copy and paste the code, or I can press Command Enter. That will run the code, and you'll see here that it prints 10, just like we expected. And I'll again make that deliberate mistake here, saying print Z without Z being defined. It's going to give me an error again. If I haven't saved it, I can see that from the white button here. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. I can do that through the menus or Control or Command S, depending on your OS. So now I've got two changes, and I want to push both of those back to GitHub. So I can either click on both of these to stage the changes. Staging just means make them ready to commit and then to push. Or I can just click here at the top. All the changes are fine to commit. Now they're both staged, and I'll say broke it, because I deliberately broke both of these files here. Go ahead and hit commit. Then I'll say, hey, do you want to sync those changes back up to GitHub? And yes, I do. Okay. So you see the Git icon now no longer shows that any files need updating and pushing. So let's go back to our repository where we just were. And what we should see, yes, here there's two files, two updates. They were just updated just now. I can click into this and see that indeed I made these changes. Same thing with the notebook. Next to the notebook should be displayed in a pretty nice way. You can see that there's an issue here. All right, very good. So let's click on actions now and see what we get. Right, so this just ran a couple seconds ago. Let's click on it. Click on the broken link, doesn't matter which one you choose. Build, and you see that it actually started with the R script and never got around to running the Python script. Okay, and here, what does it say? Error process. Oh yeah, okay, so here it is. Error in object Z not found. So this is exactly the error that we were anticipating and the error that we saw when we ran this locally. All right, so now I'm going to go back to VS Code and I'm going to fix these problems. I'll do this one first so you can see what the output looks like. If we only fix the R code, we should pass by that, but then still hit the issue with the Python file. All right, so now if I define Z and then print it, all is well. So now there's only one file that's changed. I'll stage this, commit. Oops, I should put in a message first. Okay, now it's not letting me do that.